Hi everyone, welcome to this session. So let's understand what is a callback function in JavaScript. Okay, so a callback function is a function wherein you see a function being called as an argument into another function. All right, so let's understand this by taking an example. So here I have two functions, one is fetch data and another one is handle data. Now imagine that the fetch data function is actually calling an external API. So basically it is fetching the data from some external source, right? And because it is fetching data from some external source, this might take some time. But then in your handle data function, you are doing some sort of manipulation or you're doing some sort of logic on the data that is being received in your fetch data method. So by this, what do we understand? We understand that handle data is totally dependent on the fetch data function. Okay, so we want to say something like this, that call handle data only when fetch data has been completed, has been totally executed. All right, so here if you see, I am passing one function as an argument into another function. So this is exactly what a callback is. Okay, so it is making sure that your function, whatever has been passed as an argument, it only runs after your another function, right, wherein you are calling this function as an argument, that execution has completed. And mostly you will do this when you have any function that is actually taking some amount of time to perform a certain operation, right? Now that can be anything, that can be calling an external API, or maybe like you're just waiting for data to load, or you're performing some background work, or maybe like it could be just reading files, or the example that I just gave, right, fetching data from an API, or it could be any other form of user input. Basically wherever there is a waiting which can take some time for your function to return value, so in that sort of situation you can write a callback function. All right, I'll create two functions here. I'll create a function as hi, and here I will log a value, and then let's create another function and give it the name as buy, and here it will just say buy. Now let's call both of these functions. So I'll call this one and then I'll call this one. Okay, and I'll save this. So if you see, it is getting executed in sequence, right? Hi and buy. So now here, as I said, right, let's just imagine that this function is going to take some time in order to get executed. Okay, so let's just put a timeout over here. So under this, I'll just use this function set timeout. Here we are just going to use the arrow function, and then inside this I will move my statement inside the set timeout, and here we'll give it some time. Let's say 3000 milliseconds. That means 3 seconds. So what will happen if I run this now? So here if you see the output, before I'm like running it without set timeout, if I save this now, you see buy got executed first, and then because we already knew that this is going to take some time, so it got executed later on, right? But as we are discussing, right, let's say if I already know that this should get executed first and then only the second one should get executed, so what can we do in such situation? So first of all, here let's just remove this. So what I want to say is, I want to say that hi should get executed first and then only buy should get executed, right? So basically I am passing one function as an argument to another function, right? This is what exactly the callback is. Okay, now here in the hi function you need to pass this parameter. Okay, I'll name it as callback, and whatever parameter you're passing, you also need to invoke it. All right, so here I need to invoke this as well, because this parameter is nothing but a function, right? So, and one more thing, right, do not pass the function with parenthesis. You have to pass it as an argument. Okay, so you don't need to pass it as parenthesis, you just need to pass the function name here, and then in your function, in your first function, right, where you want to pass the second function as callback, you need to accept a parameter, and what will be this parameter? This parameter is nothing but is going to be a function, right? So you need to also invoke that function. So that is why we are invoking it here. Now if I run this, let's see what happens. So if you see, it is waiting for 3 seconds, and then hi got executed. Once hi was completed, then only function buy got executed. All right, and here if you want to pass additional parameters, you can do that as well. So for example, let's say if along with this I have two other parameters, let's say a and b, and here instead of logging hi, right, I'll just take another variable, let result is equals to a plus b. Let's say I want to pass this result into this callback function, that means function 2, right, result. So now function 2 is receiving a value result, so that is why we have to pass the parameter here, and then here we can just log the value. Okay, so result, and then here we can log this value. So I'll save this, and here now we need to pass these two additional parameters, right? So here after function by, I will pass two parameters, 2 and 3, and if I save this, you see I got the result as 5. Let's take one more example. So I'll create a function and I'll name it as fetch data. Here I'm just going to give some mock data and show it to you. Okay, so here I'm going to log a value, and then I'll say fetching data from server, fetching data from server, and then I'll give some waiting time and I'll use set set timeout, and inside set timeout, let me just give it some time, let's say 3000 milliseconds. And inside this, I'm going to set some mock data, okay? Because I'm not using any API right now. So that is why I'm going to give some mock data. So let data is equals to, and here let's just create some, just hard code some data values, okay? So here I'll give the name as, let's say, Alice, and then age as 25. All right, so this is my function. Now let's go ahead and create another function. I'll create another function as use data. So I want to use data. So that is why I'm going to pass a parameter, because I'm expecting to receive some data in this function, okay? So here I'm only going to log the values, okay? And I'll just type in here data received, and here I'll just log the data. So here I want to call something like this, right? So fetch data, and then fetch use data should only get called after fetch data is complete. So I want to do something like this, correct? So I'm basically going to use a callback, and for this I need to pass a parameter here, right? You can name it anything, okay? And then I have to invoke this as well. So I'm going to invoke this here, and I'll give callback, and inside this callback I am going to pass this data, and then that's it. If I save and run this now, see, fetching data from server, it took time to get this executed first, and then only it executed the second one, data received, right? So this is how you can use callback function, okay? So whenever you are working on something, you need to figure out what is the process, right? What is the asynchronous process in your requirement, which is going to take some time. And if there is some sort of dependency, then you need to use callback function so that you can maintain the sequencing, right? I hope you got the idea about callback functions, and I'll see you in the next one.